Alright, we're going to do an album throwdown here, which was a suggestion from a viewer. Pony Trucker 8996 wanted to see Deep Purple in rock versus Led Zeppelin 1. And I thought this was a great idea. So what we're going to do is we'll throw down the albums, I'll talk about them a little bit, and then you guys can comment in the section below. And I'm also going to put up a poll over in my discussion forum, channel forum. Okay, so here's the thing with this particular throwdown. The albums are a lot alike in that they use similar elements that went on to become the foundation for heavy metal. For example, they're both very blues based, they're very guitar based, and they also have a strong element of organ and keys. They have very, what you might call histrionic or very dramatic high-pitched vocals, and they have up-tempo songs mixed in with slower ballady type things, and they both have like a dreamy atmosphere to them and a mystical atmosphere to them. They both are experimental, and they both reflect this kind of idea that the album matters more than the individual songs, which was new at the time. Back then in the late 60s, singles were the way that bands identified and made a name for themselves. So both of these bands, Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple, were like, well, singles don't really matter to us. What we want to do is make a statement with the entire album. And so both of these bands do this on these albums. So let's start off a little bit and talk about In Rock. One of the things about it that I think is really cool and really interesting is that it has so many different styles of music on it. You've got everything from almost like experimental jazz to just straight ahead rock. And I think that that's also true for Led Zeppelin 1, but Led Zeppelin 1 sticks a little bit more to its blues roots than In Rock. And I think that that is one of the things that should probably be factored in when weighing the albums together. So what I think is the best way to do is approach it by a few select categories like songs, and then musicianship, and then production. And then from there, it really just comes down to taste. So with In Rock, you've got songs that range, like I say, from straight ahead rock like Speed King to like political poetic ballads like Child in Time, all the way to experimental jazz fusion-esque songs like Hard Lovin' Man or Flight of the Rat. And then if you look at Led Zeppelin 1, you have a very similar pattern. You have straight ahead rock song like Good Times, Bad Times, but you also have a jazz fusion blues experimental thing like How Many More Times. So as far as songs go, again, it's neither one of these bands is interested in making singles. So comparing the songs comes down to a matter of taste, because just as Jimmy Page is well known for borrowing a lot on Led Zeppelin 1, You Shook Me, which is basically a cover of a Willie Dixon song. You've got Dazed and Confused, which is basically a cover of a Jake Holmes song. You've got Black Mountainside, which is a cover of a Burt Jansch song. You've got I Can't Quit You Baby, which is another Willie Dixon song. And you've got Communication Breakdown, which is basically a revisioning of Eddie Cochran's Nervous Breakdown. So there's a lot of borrowing and bits and pieces going on with the songwriting for Led Zeppelin 1, but you could say the same thing for Deep Purple In Rock. Ritchie Blackmore's on record talking about the various pieces and bits that he borrowed. I could make the similar list as I just ran down with Jimmy Page. The big difference is because Deep Purple had come out of a long experience of playing with symphonies and doing improvisational work, that they have more of an ensemble feeling, whereas Jimmy Page was just learning to discover Led Zeppelin's capabilities when they made Led Zeppelin 1. So the songs for Deep Purple are just a starting point for a larger musical exploration, whereas the songs are the meat of the matter on Led Zeppelin 1, more so than on any other Led Zeppelin album. The band is song focused for the most part. That's one difference. Now, as far as the musicianship goes, this is where we get another, it's very, very close to say. So you've got someone like John Lord in Deep Purple who brings this incredible musicianship, this studied classical perfection to the band. But you got the same thing in Led Zeppelin with John Paul Jones. Well, in Deep Purple, you got Ian Pace, who's this hard-hitting, incredibly inventive, really groovy drummer that brings a special kind of balance, but a heaviness and a grit to everything that Deep Purple does. But wait a minute, you have the same thing with John Bonham, but you have it even more. You have John Bonham being the definitive hard rock drummer. So then you've got this great, dramatic, histrionic, over-the-top vocalist who is capable of singing something like Child in Time with Deep Purple and Ian Gillan. But wait a minute, you've got Robert Plant over on Led Zeppelin doing Dazed and Confused, and he's bringing this heavy blues element to what he's doing. So when you start to look at the individual musicians, you realize there's a lot in common here. Then you've got Ritchie Blackmore, who's this slightly sinister, slightly experimental, virtuosic guitar player. Oh, wait a minute, you've got this slightly sinister, slightly experimental, virtuosic guitar player in Jimmy Page. So I'll leave it up to you to decide which one you think has better musicianship. For me, it's almost a toss-up. Now, in the final category that I mentioned would be production, and here is the only place where I start to see light between the two bands. And in this respect, I feel that Led Zeppelin 1 is probably, if not the best produced Led Zeppelin album, it's in the top 3, you know? It's Jimmy Page's peak as a producer in a certain respect, in that you can tell that he had a vision for the album and that he was able to capture most of it. There are very few weak spots in terms of how the production works, and yet there's not too much time spent on the production. The production doesn't get in the way of the songs. There's rawness to I Can't Quit You Babe, and there's a rawness even to Dazed and Confused, and there's a minimalist approach to the use of equipment. And I think Page was really on fire when he decided what he wanted to do with the album. That was where it went well. That's where it started to become brilliant, was from the very conception of it, the vision of it. You can tell that he had a vision, and that's what separates it from In Rock. Whereas In Rock feels like the band decided, okay, we're going to make a heavy rock format album. Let's see what happens. And they went and they did that. And Ritchie Blackmore probably led the way with the songwriting. But the thing is, it has a much less focused, much less visionary feeling to it. It has much more of an experimental search and seek and find feeling to it, whereas Page has more of a polished approach. So I would say, in terms of the production, where you don't have to say one is better than the other, but you do have to acknowledge that they're different. In Rock is way less polished and has less of a vision behind the production than Led Zeppelin 1. So I said that I would give you my verdict on which album I think is better. And for me, this is very, very tough. I actually have to come down on the side of Led Zeppelin 1, primarily due to the production, although I feel that the songs and the band sound is almost better on In Rock. I think that in some respects, Deep Purple's lack of purpose, willingness to just kind of jam around to find album-oriented material, is more interesting in a certain degree, but at the same time, Led Zeppelin's absolute polish, Led Zeppelin's ability to bring Jimmy Page's vision fully out and put it into the world is much more complete than Deep Purple's statement. Now, as far as the individual songs go, on any given day, I might like one set of songs more than the other, so I really have to just go down. At the very end, it really just comes down to the production. Anyway, that's my thought, and I thank Pony Trucker 8996 for this great idea, and I'd love to hear your ideas, so leave a comment in the section below. Remember to like and subscribe, and I've got a poll up you can vote in as well. There's a link down there. Thanks a lot.